Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another Amateur Hour Sports podcast. My name is Jacob, and it's just going to be me talking today. Going to give you my Premier League team of the decade, the best 11 of the past decade. From what I feel, what I've seen, the Premier League is the league I watch the most. Soccer is the sport I watch the most. I have a great sense of the Premier League, and I'm just going to go over the best team I feel that I've seen from the decade, starting from the back, working into a 4-3-3 formation. So we're just going to get right into the team. Starting in goal, I'd have David De Gea, and I know he's been a little bit worse and a little bit off form in the last maybe season and a half, maybe 2 seasons, but there's no question for me that De Gea is the number one goalkeeper of the decade. He's been very consistent up until this point, and he's played for almost the entire decade, starting in 2011 at Manchester United. I know he had maybe one season at Man before he reached his top level as a goalkeeper, but for a while in the mid 2010s, he was the best goalkeeper in the world, and some of the saves that he's pulled off, it's just an endless highlight reel of top quality saves. This guy pulls off things you can't even, it's unfathomable, some of the saves, especially the one that sticks out to me the most was, I believe it was 2016 or 2015 against Everton when we were up 2-1 and Brian Oviedo hit one going right into the top corner, and somehow De Gea outstretched his top hand and pushed it over the crossbar. But that's not the only one. Like, even the Muriel one in the Europa League against Sevilla sticks out to me. I believe it was Sevilla, but it was against Muriel. It was in the Champions League against Sevilla, actually, that one. I know we didn't win that tie, but that save, phenomenal. Anyways, moving forward, the defense, I found the center backs very easy to pick out, but the full backs were where I had a little bit more difficulty selecting. I was very much fond of John Terry and Vincent Kompany as the center backs. I mean, Vincent Kompany, I'll start with him. There's absolutely no question. Played for Man City pretty much the entire decade, left this summer to go to Anderlecht, the team he started with, to be a player manager. But unbelievable Vincent Kompany at Man City. And Man City, who really took over this decade and were the marquee team of the decade in the Premier League. They ended up winning how many? I think they won 3 Premier Leagues. No, excuse me. It was 4 Premier Leagues in this decade. And Man City fans especially will know that in the seasons that Vincent Kompany did suffer from injuries were the seasons where Man City struggled more. And when Vincent Kompany was fit, Manchester City thrived for those 4 Premier League titles, the most of the decade by any team. And it kind of pains me to say as a Manchester United fan, but that's the fact of the matter. He was stellar and so consistent throughout the decade. He was one of the best center backs in the world as well throughout the 2010s. Tremendous player. And the other one, John Terry. This one's a little bit harder to select, but I feel very confident in selecting John Terry. Played at Chelsea from 2010 all the way to 2017. He won 3 Premier League titles in those 7-year span this decade as captain of Chelsea, and was just absolutely immense. Not to mention that he's a tremendous goal scorer in the Premier League. I believe Leighton Baines has overtaken him. I'm just gonna double check that right now, but one of the top scoring defenders in Premier League history, and unbelievable player for Chelsea. Fit so many different players, so many different managers, so many different systems, and he always seemed to thrive, be a tough tackler, was great for England. And just checking over right now, yes, John Terry is the highest scoring Premier League defender of all time, so that's part of it, but I mostly put it down to his defensive capabilities, and there's no question there. When I get to fullbacks, I found it a little bit more difficult to select these. I feel as though there's a 3-way race between Patrice Evra, Cesar Azpilicueta, and Branislav Ivanovic. I decided to go for Azpilicueta and Branislav Ivanovic, and I'll explain why. For Evra, though he was tremendous at the start of the decade, he kind of faded a little bit off after Ferguson's retirement, as Manchester United club did, many players did. And I feel as though Azpilicueta especially, who I put at the left back slot in this team, was very consistent throughout the decade. Though we featured him in our most overrated Premier League player podcast, where Cody, a Chelsea fan, actually alluded to him being the most overrated player. And though I agreed, I feel as though he's fallen off a tiny bit in the last couple seasons, but for almost the entire decade, starting with Chelsea in 2012, he's been immense, whether he's playing left back, right back, center back, anywhere. He has been stellar. Even as a right wing back, if you're playing a back three, he's been tremendous. And in that 2016 season where Chelsea ended up winning the Premier League, the 2016-2017 season, he was absolutely stellar, absolutely tremendous, was a marquee player in that team, one of the most important players along with Eden Hazard in that team, just so consistent throughout the decade. I had to put in Azpilicueta. Whether it was at right back or left back, I had to put him in. The debate was between Branislav Ivanovic and Patrice Evra, so I decided to put in Azpilicueta at left back, and I went for Branislav Ivanovic. He's another one who was very good at scoring, even from defense, and he was also quite useful at the back because he could play at the fullback position, at right fullback, or he could play as a center back for Chelsea. And a big presence, a tough tackler, tremendous ability in the air. We'll always remember his Europa League winner against Benfica in the 90th minute. What a tremendous header that was. And playing 7 years in the decade, won 3 Premier League titles as well. He was great. He was very consistent. Even though he didn't have a ton of pace, he knew the positioning, how to get forward, and be that attacking fullback, which is odd for a player of his ability because of his lack of pace, and you would think a lack of skill on the ball. But Ivanovic, fairly consistent throughout the decade. I'm going to have to put him at right back. Now we move into midfield. I'll play my team here with, I guess, a 6, an 8, and a 10. And I'll start with the 6 being N'Golo Kante. He completely revitalized that position in the Premier League and made it much more relevant because for the start of the decade, the Premier League was dominated by the 4-2-3-1 formation. But because of N'Golo Kante, teams could then switch to a 4-3-3 where you have one holder and 2 8s in front of him, so more so a 4-1-2-3. And because of how Kante performed when he joined Leicester in that tremendous title-winning season, it allowed for Leicester, who are one of the biggest stories of the decade, to win a Premier League. And that is something I believe that will never happen again. A team going from almost getting relegated to winning the Premier League in the span of one season. And from winning that and then going to Chelsea and getting PFA Player of the Year in another Premier League win. So in his first 2 seasons in the Premier League, he won the Premier League. And he's been absolutely tremendous every single season he's been in the Premier League. What a signing that was for Leicester. Unbelievable scouting for a guy who's playing almost second tier of French football, then going to Leicester and being an absolute showstopper at holding mid. Just the engine on this guy. He's everywhere on the pitch. Interceptions, tackles, and just now he's starting to get a little bit more going forward, producing offensively, but there is no question that, for me, Kante is the best number 6 of the decade. Moving on to the number 8 I have. In the 8 slot, I'm putting Yaya Toure. 20 goals in one season as a midfielder is tremendous, and Yaya Toure pulled that off in an unbelievable season. I believe he was 3rd in the Premier League in goal scoring that year. Let me just confirm which season that was. But Yaya Toure playing for Man City for 8 seasons in this decade, and we know how good Yaya Toure was. He was everywhere on the pitch as well. He could do it for you defensively, and he developed that sense of going forward. He was so good at scoring free kicks. He was so good going forward, setting up the Man City attacks. He was so instrumental in all of their Premier League victories, except for the 4th one. In the first 3, he was so pivotal. He was a pivotal player in that midfield. Just the presence that he had in the midfield. And it was the 2013-14 season where he came alive with those 20 goals and scored 10 the next season. Never quite reached 20 goals, but it wasn't just the goals that were part of his game. When he did score, there were some spectacular goals. Like there was an FA Cup final goal from 30 yards that he curled top corner against Stoke City. I believe it was the FA Cup final. It could have been the League Cup final. But sort of faded off near the end of his Manchester City career. But how immense he was in that early part of his Man City career, just for like a phenomenal 6 seasons for Man City at the start to start the decade all the way through to 2016. We'll move on to the number 10. I don't think there can be any debate about it being David Silva in this slot. Just he's played the entire decade with Manchester City, winning all 4 of those Premier League titles. I think he's the catalyst for Manchester City's success. He is the most important player in this, I guess we'll call it a bit of a dynasty for Man City in their history over the last decade and a little bit. Just unbelievable footwork, passing ability, range of passing, football sense, football IQ, pops up with some tremendous goals here and there. He's been playing, just where you thought in 2017, 2016, he may have been fading off a tiny bit. All of a sudden, just raises his game to a whole new level in the last couple of years when Man City were dominating, winning 2 Premier League titles in a row. What a tremendous player. What a treat it is to watch David Silva play. And that's another sad one to say, being a Manchester United fan. But that's the facts of the matter with how talented David Silva has been this decade. Not much more to say. The forwards is where it was a bit more tricky to figure out who was the best 3. I decided to kind of cheat a little bit on the 4-3-3 and pick 2 strikers in this because there were 2 tremendous strikers, and I'll get to them. But Eden Hazard, another one who played a lot of this decade. He played 8 seasons this decade. He joined Chelsea after they won the Champions League in, 2012, I believe. And he's another one who has been absolutely tremendous throughout the entire decade. He has won a PFA Premier League Player of the Season in 2014-15 when Chelsea won the Premier League with Jose Mourinho as their coach. So talented on the ball, such a knack for scoring goals, can create so many goals, was absolutely instrumental for Chelsea in their success over the course of the decade because he can run a game on his own. He can play anywhere in a front 3. He can even play as the 10, and I'm kind of playing him as a bit of a false 9 in this team in the decade behind the 2 strikers. Since joining from Lille, worked his way up to that big money move to Real Madrid, and though he's not producing quite as well at Real Madrid, we know what a special player Eden Hazard is. And moving on to my 2 strikers, starting with Sergio Aguero. He was an absolute staple in this team of the decade for me. Playing for Manchester City since 2011. He's a top goal scorer in their history. He is also another catalyst in their success along with Kompany and David Silva. I don't think he's quite at that level of David Silva, but Sergio Aguero, one of the best strikers in the world throughout the entire decade playing for Man City, not just the Premier League, but in the entire world. Arguably, on his day, the best number 9 in world football during the course of this decade. I believe he won the Golden Boot at one point in 2014. I think it was 2014-15 that he won the Golden Boot. Absolutely tremendous stuff from Sergio Aguero. I know Man City didn't win the league in 2014-15, but that was the only time he's won the Golden Boot, and a lot of injuries have hampered him from getting these solo awards because of the likes of Harry Kane, Luis Suarez, Robin van Persie, Gareth Bale. But I didn't put these kind of names in because of how consistent Sergio Aguero has been throughout the course of this decade. And the last player, the 11th, Harry Kane. This was a really tough one. I was deciding between him and Robin van Persie for this slot, but I feel like Robin van Persie as well, after Ferguson left Manchester United, fell off a little bit, whereas Harry Kane, the entire time he's been playing at Tottenham, like actually getting proper game time and being a marquee player in their team, since about the 2014 season, he has been phenomenal each season. He's won 2 Golden Boots. He's nearly won another 2, but I'm sure there are more on the way in the future for Harry Kane. I feel he's one of the best hold-up strikers in the world, one of the best at playmaking, getting the ball with his back to goal and bringing everybody else into the game. He's been a revelation, and I think he's been the kind of front page guy for Tottenham's rise through the decade, from being a mid-table mediocrity team to being Champions League top 4 every single season. I know that this season hasn't looked quite that way yet, but Tottenham with still a long season left can still find themselves in that place given how close it is. I'm sure they'll be in a top 6 spot by the end of the season, especially with Jose Mourinho as their coach. But Harry Kane, every single year, from one season wonder, he's turned into a 5-6 season wonder. And I don't see it stopping anytime soon. There are a lot of goal-scoring records that Harry Kane can break. He has that striker's desire to just score. All he wants to do is put the ball in the back of the net, and I love that mentality that he displays. He shows it for England, shows it for Tottenham, shows it in Europe, shows it in the Premier League. Everywhere he goes with Tottenham, he scores goals. And that'll wrap up my team. If you have a player that you think should have been in the team of the decade, you can let me know. You can maybe tell me why you think he should be in above somebody else. But I'll go over my team again. De Gea, Ivanovic, Terry, Kompany, Azpilicueta, Conte, Yaya Toure, David Silva, Eden Hazard, Sergio Aguero, Harry Kane. That'll wrap up this episode of the Amateur Hour Sports Podcast. Follow us, Twitter and Instagram, at AmateurPDC. Follow us on Spotify, Amateur Hour Sports. Also, Amateur Hour Sports on YouTube. Subscribe there, like the video if you enjoyed, and keep coming back because we post every single day to keep you up in the sporting world. We'll see you again tomorrow.